Good morning and welcome to the Special Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. It is Wednesday, September 29th, and it is 9:30 a.m. I'd like to thank you for being here and acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Shishal First Nation. So we have an agenda. The final two items, items 5 and 6, have been provided to directors and I believe have been posted on our website. So I would look for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Oh, I move the microphone out of the way. So item number 2 is the introduction board remuneration review overview from our CAO. Mr. McKinley, take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen. See how this goes. So far, so good, maybe? So I've got it's a brief introduction, probably 5-6 minutes, and then just to set a bit of context. So, whoops, we're going to go, I don't know how to reverse. We're going to go, there we go. We'll go through the current status of where we're at with the remuneration bylaw. We'll quickly just go through looking at a glance at the remuneration rates, the allowable expenses and constituency fees. Brief slide on some of the lessons we learned through this, and a slide on next steps. So the board actually approved the 22 to 2025 remuneration rate structure at the January 12th regular board meeting, but the board has yet to adopt and implement the amended director's remuneration bylaw, which is a big part of the reason for our special CAS meeting today. So this is a quick snapshot of the existing previous remuneration rates and the proposed remuneration rates, and this was included in the agenda package. A couple of things to draw your attention to, I guess, in terms of changes, is the previous remuneration rate structure, which was per meeting based, also included a standing committee chair supplement, an annual amount, and the remuneration rate task force had removed that as part of their recommendation. So you'll note on the remuneration rates that the standing committee chair supplement amount is no longer there. In order to arrive at these, the task force looked at tons of remuneration bylaws from various regional districts across BC. We also pulled all of the regional district remuneration and travel allowance rates for the last 5 years, all the ones we could off the internet as well, just to use them for context setting purposes. So those were all included in the analysis and review. The next one is a summary of the allowable expenses, and what it shows is based on the existing rates, which were established in 2000, that there is alignment previously between the board rates and the staff rates, which were set in 2006. Really, the only suggestion moving forward is a change to the meal per diems and the overnight, and the addition of an incidentals fee. And these would be based on the National Joint Council of the Public Service of Canada, who every 6 months benchmarks suggested travel and reimbursement rates that local governments can use. So these are based on their October 1st, 2021 recommended rates. They haven't been approved yet. They won't be approved till October 1st, but these are where that comes from. It's easy to link to it, and they update it twice a year. The only other one is the mileage rate is attached to the province of BC mileage rate, and that's always adjusted when they make an adjustment for that one. The next one, the constituencies fees. The task force didn't recommend changes to the annual constituency fees, but we have built in the idea of allowing $750 from within those annual constituency fees being able to be used to purchase technology. And essentially that's any technology that you as directors feel would assist you perform your duties better. If you like the cell phone that's provided to you, great. If you want to buy a cell phone that you think works better, we're going to provide a cell phone, we provide the Surface. Those are fully supported by our IT staff. any other purchases you make using this proposed allowance from within your existing constituency fees would be your purchase and unsupported by our staff. So a couple lessons we learned from this bylaw review. I would say this probably, we've talked in the past about needing to carve out some time to fix out-of-date bylaws, out-of-date policies, and that it's really important work we need to do. This review probably qualifies in maybe the moderate category in terms of complexity, moving parts, linkages to policy when the bylaw is reviewed, how many people were involved. So what was really interesting when we took this on, because we haven't had a lot of time to take these on for a while, and we embraced this one. This involved 9 different staff members, a task force of 3. The 9 different staff members span 3 departments, primarily legislative services, the office of the CAO, and finance. And over 350 hours of staff time was invested, plus all the time that the task force put in to get to where we are here. And it's been an interesting process, and it's eye-opening in terms of, as we identify high priority bylaws and policies that need to be updated and amended, it just shows the massive size of the investment required to actually get from start to where we are today, considering the final changes before it gets adopted. We also noticed that the task force scope didn't cover everything. The deeper into the weeds you go, you start to realize, oh, we didn't consider this or we didn't consider that. And one of the things we've noticed that based on the conversation today, we might need to do a tiny bit of work on before the bylaw is finally adopted is there's still a couple of things on benefit eligibility and benefit administration that we noticed haven't been fully fleshed out and contemplated even as of late yesterday afternoon. And the other thing we're noticing is when we go to make one change and it results in like a 12 more cascading changes, and we look at upgrading so many of our systems and processes, we just have to be respectful of the amount of change fatigue that could occur in the organization. And that'll become more apparent as we start to look at some of the projects that are proposed for 2022. Some of them don't have big budget implications, but they have large effort implications in terms of how many departments and how many individuals and so forth are involved. Finally, for next steps, based on what happens today, because the board or the committee members have tons of flexibility as we go through the agenda to make suggestions, we will target bringing back the bylaw and policies for adoption at the October 14th board meeting next month. And that's my intro. I'll stop sharing the screen. There.
All right, I may switch devices here. I'm using my iPad right now for my camera, but it's not great for seeing who's got their hands up. So I might switch to my Surface to be able to manage that. So anyway, any questions of our CAO before we move forward to item number 3? Okay, Director Ties and then Director Hiltz.
Thank you. The per diem rates are they then from now on linked to this index that you mentioned, or is that this do we have to manually do that?
They wouldn't be heretofore linked to that rate. That is the rate we're recommending we use to establish it now, and it would be up to the next bylaw review process to make a determination or recommendations of rates moving forward as per the recommended sort of review times being toward the end of the next term.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. The amount of staff time is drawing attention, like over 30 grand probably in this process, just ballparking it. So I'm wondering about the service that this is coming. So this would be general government, the service that pays for that. So when other departments participate, is it coming out of the general government, or is it kind of like, I'm thinking of this, how we apportion the expenses and whether this is something that we need to plan for in terms of a budget, like set aside money, or is it just absorbed within the existing budgets always?
I'll take the first stab at that, and Tina, I'll look for some help from you. Certainly, a lot of this time would have come out of general government, but I'm not sure if it had any leakages into other departments in terms of where hours were allocated by different staff that might have been working on the project at any one time. And I recognize that it was a lot of staff time on this one, but there was a lot to unpack on this one. A lot of research. Some would be far less. Some would be far more, actually. But I said that really more just for context and to just to explain the context of what's involved when you start to unpack these old bylaws and policies, and it goes to show why they should probably, ideally, be amended a little more often, so it doesn't take such a Herculean effort to play catch up.
Okay, follow up to Director Ty's comment about the link. In the bylaw, we're looking at linking to the provincial for the mileage. So could we not link to the other for the per diem for meals?
I think the answer is there's no reason why there's no reason why you couldn't. It's just we haven't made the suggestion to do that. We looked at a number of different per diem rates. When I looked at the per diem rates, I tried to go back 5 years amongst all the regional districts. And some of the regional districts have actually done a remuneration review within the last 24 months. So we tried to find, we were trying to strike a balance between what the market is showing us in terms of per diem rates and then tie it to something that's easy to point to, easily defensible in terms of saying, well, this is an organization that tries to make suggestions that help set rates. So it could be locked to that, and it could be left up to the next remuneration review to do some analysis and make some recommendations.
Okay, so this is interesting. I was linked in, or logged in on my iPad. I opened up my Surface, logged in there, and left on my iPad, and it took me out of the other one as well. Interesting.
So how are you doing now?
I don't know. Okay, I'm coming in right now. Yes, Director Hills.
I think Tina, CFO's hand was up there.
And Ms. Perot?
Yeah, it was just to perhaps answer one of the earlier questions just regarding the mileage rates. So the mileage rates for the province are renewed every April. The reason why it wasn't recommended to use the per diem rates for the province is that they were actually less than, I believe, what we currently have in our bylaws. So it didn't quite make sense. So we were trying to align something that aligned with the other local governments and also would catch us up a little bit. So it's sort of on the top end of the range of other local governments. It adds a few different items. Now, with the other one, as far as an escalator, that is a contemplation that the committee most certainly can do. It just requires some additional work. So the mileage, for instance, the province resets it every April 1st of each year. And so that's automatically done here. The province of BC's mileage rate is higher than the federal rate. It's actually 1 cent cheaper or less than. So, and then the federal per diems get updated every 6 months. And we just thought from an internal process, because we want to make sure there's alignment between the elected officials and the staff. And so we just thought from a workload perspective that we would kind of do that in sequence and in lockstep. So, because it requires some additional back end work. So that was some of the rationale.
Thank you. Directors, any further questions or comments? And then if not, we'll go into the actual reports. Okay, seeing no other hands up, we'll move on to item number. I'd look to directors first to receive all the reports. And, okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Annex B. Ms. Reed, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to bring forward a second revised draft version of the Director's Remuneration Bylaw, which is intended to implement a new remuneration flat rate structure per the recommendations presented earlier this year by the Director's Remuneration Review Task Force. The first draft of the bylaw was presented at the May Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting, and further amendments were recommended by directors at that time. So they have now been incorporated into the bylaw and are presented here for the committee's consideration.
All right, directors. How would you like to proceed? There are some, there's a document attached showing the changes, using track changes. A couple of the points that are a number of them. Number 3.6, page 7. That's a change going forward. Any questions or comments, Director Ties?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we want to have a bit of a discussion about that. I guess playing the devil's advocate, if I were to attend every third meeting, I would still be receiving my stipend. And I'm also wondering, looking to the Sechelt Nation, they're probably unlikely to attend regularly enough to receive a stipend, but we do want them at the table. So how do we deal with that?
Staff want to address that, or, I mean, per this bylaw, if it's adopted as is, if they do not attend and do not request permission of the board, the pay just wouldn't happen. Director McMahon.
I'm wondering if we could simply say that the regional district may suspend payment of the annual stipend rather than will, and that would get around that one.
So what you're saying is we would treat one director different than the others, potentially?
Well, we are already treating that director differently than the others in terms of how their pay is handled. But it would be at the discretion, presumably, of the board whether or not to suspend pay. I throw it out there.
Thank you. Anybody else? See, okay, Director Pratt.
There was one question I had that brought up at agenda review in regards to whether or not there's any reference to absentee directors in the Local Government Act, and I was just wondering if the corporate officer had any, was able to find that information as well.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, so it's within the context of director disqualification, not specific to remuneration though, and it's for failure to attend meetings, and it's section 204 of the Local Government Act, which states that if a member is absent for a period of either 60 consecutive days or 4 consecutive regularly scheduled board meetings, whichever time is longer, then they are subject to disqualification from office.
Thank you. Director Ties and then Director McMahon.
I guess that begs the question, is the Sechelt Nation aware of this? And then also, I'm just wondering if we should put some sort of You know, if a director only occasionally appears, like the Seashell Nation, should we pay them on a per meeting scale? Just because we do want them here, and it's not fair for them to not get anything. But yeah, so these are just things I'm pondering.
Director McMahon and then Director Toth.
I'm on a slightly different topic. So if Director Toth is on this topic, perhaps he should go first.
No, he says it's another topic. So over to you.
Well, this is just a question for general information. One of the interesting facets of the legislation for regional districts is that if a director stops attending, but they don't resign, there is no requirement for a by-election. So a director can stay in their position, and the alternate director, the unelected director, can continue in their place for an undetermined length of time. Is it within our powers to actually put in a rule that says if a director doesn't show up for 6 months, we have to have a by-election? Or would that have to be a provincial requirement?
Corporate Officer.
No, the Local Government Act would take precedent over anything that we implement. So it would be the Local Government Act would reign supreme over that.
Same topic?
Yeah, the disqualification, there's the may part of the disqualification. Who is it with the province that decides if you're disqualified, or is it within the discretion of this board to make that decision? Whose decision is it that a person becomes disqualified?
Thank you for the question. So I haven't actually looked into the entire process, but it's a fairly serious, the implications, I believe there would be a process through the province, and the disqualification prevents them from holding office until a subsequent election. So it's not something we've ever had to look into.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I am looking at 3.6, but my comments, my questions, my thoughts are around the phrase "without the leave of the board." We were at UBCM, and there were some pretty compelling arguments offered about why you shouldn't be relying on that leave of the board for permission if somebody has to step away. It was actually one of the resolutions that came up, and I think it was defeated ultimately, but there were some really interesting points that were brought up with that. And, we're good. We have a good working relationship, this board. Not all boards are going to have that. And so I wonder what alternate mechanism could be in there in the event that you do have a hostile board. I don't know if it could be without the leave of the board or the CAO or, the human resources manager. We don't want to get too far into the staff side of things because of, work safe and the things like that. But I'm just wondering if there might be another mechanism there that we could use rather than without the leave of the board.
Any questions, comments about that? Director Hiltz?
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is kind of the nudge process. Like we're gonna take some cash away from you to nudge you into a behavior. You can send regrets. So I'm not exactly sure what leave is. I suppose that's a question. Like, does the board grant that on an individual basis, or do you phone up and says I'm going somewhere? So I guess I'm wondering what discretion the board has in going from like 3 consecutive meetings to the disqualification. I see that as a spectrum. So I guess how do you, I've never asked for leave from the board, so is it medical? I don't know what that is. I don't know what it means, essentially.
I'm going to go to corporate officer.
Thank you. Chair, I would interpret that as me being at the discretion of the board, and I would presume that there would be some sort of a resolution that would have to be passed if it was without the leave of the board in order to enact a suspension of pay. So it would have to be something in the context of this that would be debated by the board, voted on by the board before it would be implemented. It wouldn't be automatic.
one of the examples that came up at UBCM was one of the directors or municipal people got pregnant, and so needed a leave for, maternity leave during the term, and felt that they should not have to go to the board for leave to be able to take advantage of that. But otherwise, they would be without pay. So that was the situation that came up. Only affects females in that case. Although, they're also talking about paternity leave, right? That's one thing that came up too, was paternity leave. So that would, that's the kind of conversation that would come back to the board. Any other questions or comments on that one? Director Pratt.
So with 3.6 then, I'm wondering if just inserting the phrase by board resolution in there would help with the clarity around that process. I do have concerns as brought up by other directors, if there is a hostile board or if there is maybe a not a good working relationship. Sometimes, I mean, in my previous experience as a school board trustee, we've had medical instances. I know the SCRD board has had medical instances where a director's had to take a significant amount of time off. So it's, we could insert the phrase by board resolution in however it works there. I do have the concern though, like as Director Toth said, yes, we have a good working relationship, but I've certainly seen a hostile working relationship, not, amongst government organizations where there might not be that. And as Chair Seekers brought up, the whole issue around, a pregnancy or paternity leave is another one.
All right, so that sounds like that's one we're going to come back to. I'm going to take you down to page 8, 3.4, or 3 subsection 4. So it's written once per calendar year. And in going through the recommendation that we passed as a board, it actually indicated that once per calendar year, a director may attend, a conference not listed. But in the resolution, it was that we could come to the board and request permission to attend additional, and that's not in the bylaw as written. So we need to look at, do we want that in there? Okay, so I'll show you where that is in the recommendation. Yes, page 14. If you go to page 14. The second and that, right? It says be limited for external conferences and workshop expenses to 1 per year in addition to UBCM and AVICC, with the proviso that directors may make a special request to the board to attend more. I mean, I'm thinking of LGLA, for example, right? If somebody's looking at getting, is it LGLA? Yes. Somebody's looking at getting certified. That may require additional courses. I mean, it does require additional courses. So is that something that we want to support board members to do? Because that's personal development in the role. But the way the bylaw is written right now is AVICC, UBCM, and 1 additional. And that's it. No leave to come to the board for additional support. Okay, we have 2 hands up. I have Director Ties and Director McMahon.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to make that motion. I'm wondering, during the review yesterday, or the agenda meeting, there's a number of items that we found, and I'm wondering if we should put those all in one, or if we should go through it each item by item.
Okay, so far we've had a conversation about 3.6. And 3 subsection 4. Any others? Did any others, Director Ties, and then I'll go to Director McMahon. Okay, maybe I'll come back to you, Director Ties. Director McMahon, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I supported that additional flexibility about an additional conference.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Director Pratt.
I'd like to just float a term out there rather than using conference or workshop to call it professional development. Just as a thought.
Thank you, Director Hilt.
There's the conferences and then there's the training. So this is about having stipend, right? This is about, so you can take as much training as you want and have all that paid for, as far as I can see from their eligible expenses, but you don't get stipend. So that's within your core service of whatever your professional development is within your core service funding is kind of how I'm seeing that. So stipend goes to the more mandatory things. The extra stuff like professional development, as much as you want to consume, the expenses are covered, but not your per diem. So I think I was looking at that from the alternate director. So I see the alternate director gets $1,600. That's their core service. They're not going to get a stipend for attending, but they can, and their expenses will be paid. So they get the benefit of the training, but they don't get the benefit of an additional bump in the stipend. So I see it as kind of in the core service.
So if we have somebody who's elected as a board member, director, and they have to take days off work to attend these, we're not going to pay them the stipend? So they're giving up their pay to attend for the development. We're not going to pay them for that. So I see that as a disincentive to actually do it and costly for their bottom line. Director McMahon.
Boy, I listen to you guys and I keep changing my mind. The procedure for reimbursement for conferences where we don't receive a stipend, is there a procedure for that? Do we have to go to the board to get permission, or is that just a regular expense? Like I can go to 5 conferences and expense my registration fees, and that's okay? Or is there a procedure for getting approval for that?
All right, so now we're getting into the, all right, so, hang on, where are we? So right now what it reads is once per calendar year, a director may, prior to attending a conference not listed in section 3.3 of this bylaw, request approval by board resolution to attend such conference and receive the conference stipend as set out in Schedule A of the bylaw. That's what's coming forward in the in the bylaw. If we look at page 14, it says, and that compensation be limited for external conference and workshop expenses to 1 per year in addition to UBCM and AVICC, with the proviso that directors may make a special request to the board to attend more. So that would then cover off stipends, etc. as well, I would believe.
But,
Dr. McMahon?
sorry, I was asking about conferences for which you do not receive a stipend.
Okay, so I guess this would go, we'd have to look at, so this be conferences that would come out of your constituency expenses. Is that correct? Because that's where they would come from then.
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
I guess there's an interaction here between this policy and the expenses one, and I just wanted to be clear that I understood the process.
Okay, if you go to page 18, this is the old one. Hang on, we'd have to go to the new one. Okay, so this would be the new, agenda item 5. No, 6. Item 6. This would be the, no, where would the constituency expenses show up in here then? Are there details on that? Yep, CEO or
Thank you,
corporate
Chair.
officer?
I think the expenses you're looking for are actually in the schedule of allowable, it's the travel. It's the schedule for the travel expenses where we pay for expenses for conferences. The stipends are dealt with in the bylaw, but the travel expenses are dealt with in the schedule, not the constituency policy, but the travel and expenses policy, and that's where I think the conference fee would also be
Right.
charged to.
So you're looking on page 23
Page
then?
23.
Yeah. So there's the course fee, course or conference registration fee. So it's just the stipend piece.
Yes, which I would suggest the process would be by board resolution as it is now for extraordinary meetings. The board passes a resolution to pay either stipend and expenses or just expenses if it's not within the context of what's provided in the policy.
Okay, follow-up, Director McMahon, is that clear?
It's fairly clear. I'm not quite 100% on it, but I'm okay.
Okay, so in the bylaw, attachment B, that's where it's indicating that we would need to put something in here indicating that directors could come to the board and request stipend for attending conferences or workshops or courses. Yeah, corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. If I may suggest, if the board wishes to have more flexibility within this provision, it could be achieved by striking out once per calendar year.
Director McMahon?
Yes, that actually, that does make it a little clearer, but I just wanted to be clear. So if one of us signs up for an online course, for example, so we need to make sure that we go to the board first to get a resolution to say that the course registration fee for that course is an allowable expense before we commit to it. Because if we're taking a course without a per diem, then it's not a direct just expense it. It is a come to the board first to get permission thing. And if we're handling that differently than other expenses, and I'm sorry, I'm off topic because I'm on the expenses, but if we're handling it differently, then there should be a recognition of that somewhere. Just saying.
So what you're saying is if you did an online course and wanted a stipend,
No stipend.
okay, then the course, if you look on page 23, course or conference registration fees are allowable expense. So you do not need to come to the board for reimbursement of that.
Okay.
It's only if you're looking for a stipend as well, then that would need to come to the board if it is alternate to the conferences that are already listed.
So if I
Understand.
travel to a conference
Yes?
without a stipend, that is still an allowable expense. I mean, I'm saying how much travel could I run up without getting approval?
It looks like private motor vehicle use is covered, and you have up to, as an electoral area director, you have the 2,500 plus the 1,000 that comes out of the other budget pot. Director Pratt, you had your hand up.
I'm going to go back to, sorry, I just was scrolling down to see if I could find it in a different place, but just bear with me. So page 11, it starts off speaking of expenses and goes down into page 12. And so under 4.3, 4.3, all expenses and expenditures not specifically authorized by the expense reimbursement policy must receive the authorization of the board before they are incurred to be eligible for reimbursement. So to me, that takes care of any professional development and all of that. So we just need to make sure that it's covered in the expense reimbursement policy, or that there's just some explicitness. And when we get into the roles and responsibilities on, I have some suggestions around professional development there, especially around directors, because to me, there's very much, this speaks to, I believe, what Director McMahon is saying, is there are going to be courses and workshops and conferences that will support you in your role of director that are outside of the major conferences. And so we just, it's finding the nuances that link it all together and making sure that we're covered in that way. So, yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments? If there's nothing, I'd like to move to attachment B, which is where all of this has come together, which is what we would need to make changes to send back to staff and or move forward. So attachment B is the bylaw without the track changes. So in here is in 3 subsection 4, what I've heard is we'd like to strike out once per calendar year to allow for that. Then 3 subsection 6, are there any changes that directors would like to put forward? Director Hiltz?
Yeah, on the 3.4, I'm trying to think of, because this was a recommendation from the task force. And what I took from the task force is they're trying to kind of put us into a bit of a box. They don't want, to going and doing a 6-week course in Quebec on learning French. It might be interesting and help, but does it help you serve your role? So I think that's what I was they're trying to constrain us some ways in where our core service is. That's what and their core service might not be attending conferences, but it might be doing the deliberation around the table. So that's how I interpreted why there was a limit on it, opposed to, because that was a recommendation from the task force, but we don't really have the context of why they put it there. So
Right, so that's why it has to be at the approval of the board. So as a director, if you want to go take courses in French or on, learning French, you would need to sell your board members on approving that. Like, why do you see that that's required in your role at this table? If the board agrees with what you've said, they'll support you. If not, they won't.
yeah, that works. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
CAO?
I guess just one more thing for consideration on the removal of the once per year. I think one of the things that the once per year contemplated was within the existing budget structure, it would probably not be difficult to approve once per year an additional conference or a course offering for a board member that came and made a pitch to why they would like to attend and how it would provide value at the board table. One of the potential dangers of opening it wide open is there could be many compelling reasons to take many valuable courses, but continuing to say yes could actually result in going over budget. So there would definitely be budget implications to opening it wide open without a cap of any kind.
So as I know at the District of Sechelt, we're asked there's, like what conferences would you contemplate you may be wanting to attend this year? The last couple of years, because of no travel, it's been, we haven't done as much due diligence around that. But going forward, that's a conversation so that we ensure that in the budget, we have sufficient dollars to allow for that. So that might be a conversation that we would need to have as a board prior to adopting a budget to ensure that the dollar value that's in there covers off some of the conferences that we would be looking at attending. Director Pratt?
And along with that, there's also very specific skills that one director may need over another, and it might even be, for example, a typing workshop or a public speaking program of some kind too. So it's, which is why I keep on bringing up the professional development piece, because there's sometimes some very specific skills that you need to complete your role that you don't have, that that the board can assist with helping fund.
Corporate officer? You have your microphone on. Did you want to say something? No? Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, seeing nothing on that one, I want to point to number 10, subsection 10. And I think this is one that staff are still looking into or may have gotten a response on right now. This says all directors and alternate directors are entitled to accidental death and dismemberment insurance policy for injuries sustained while traveling on the business of the regional district. My question was, is this also municipal directors? Because municipal directors are not entitled to other benefits at the regional district because we're covered under our own municipalities. So I don't know if staff had an opportunity to look that piece up. Ms. Pro?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we did look into it, and we believe that all directors are covered through AD&D, as it's covered through our policy with Aon. So it's a little bit different, and it's to cover such thing as when you're traveling and such. So it's separate than the health and dental benefits.
Okay, so accidental death and dismemberment insurance. So, okay, so offline, we'll probably need to look into whether or not that's actually been set up, because typically when you do something like that, you're required to identify who your, who your beneficiary would be, right? And I don't believe as a municipality, we've done that.
Okay, we can look into it further, and we're just consequently reviewing our insurance for 2022 now.
Okay, thank you. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, a comment on 310. As I understand it, elected people are not employees. We're not covered by WorkSafe. So this sort of steps in for the WorkSafe. Kind of, you're on the job, something happens to you, you're not at a loss. So that's I do interpret that WorkSafe aspect that this steps in for that. So I'm not sure if that's true, because as far as I understand, we're not employees. We're not covered under WorkSafe. And so if you're injured at work, you're on your own without this 310.
All right, so seeing no further questions or comments, I'd just like to ask staff if we would be okay going forward with leaving 310 in as it is, or do we need to wait in moving this bylaw forward until we get a little more clarity on that? Corporate officer?
Thank you, Chair. So from my perspective, is the question about the inclusion of municipal directors? Because it is defined in the bylaw, directors are municipal and electoral area directors.
Yes.
So I think as it's written is clear in terms of the definition of directors, including municipal.
Yes, I'm clear about that, but I'm wondering whether or not we are actually covered as municipal directors under this.
I will defer to, I think the CFO can respond to that.
If you give me a couple minutes, I can maybe answer.
Okay, because I don't want to pass this saying we're covered and then it actually isn't in the policy, or in the insurance policy that we have at the regional district. Director Hiltz.
This would, if it says all directors, their policy would have to comply with this policy then. So that would be the assumption. If we pass this, the policy covers it, and they need to seek that policy.
If it's allowable. CAO, did you want to
If
speak
it's
to
allowable.
this?
I wouldn't, I don't know the answer. We'll have to figure it out.
Okay. So currently what we've got is one change to this bylaw. In section 3(4), once per calendar year would be we'd strike that out. That's the only change that's been put forward. The other piece then on page 13, effective October 31st, 2021. And how is the board with that? Directors, questions, comments? No questions or comments. All right. While we wait for Ms. Perot to get back to us on that piece, we're going to just set that aside. We're going to move on to the next item in our agenda. This is attachment C. Sorry, no, not attachment C. Moving on to page 24. Director's Remuneration Review Policy. No, that's too far, right? Let's go back to page 3, sorry. This is where the bylaw piece starts. Oh, hang on, I'm confused. We did 3, that's the bylaw. But then we need to go to, we need to look at the remuneration piece, which would be the expenses? Where should I be next?
Page 24, Chair.
Page 24, thank you. This page after, okay. Page 24, Remuneration Review Policy. No, this isn't where I want to be. There are some questions on what we would get as expenses. So this would be page 23.
Page 33, item number 5, the reimbursement of travel and expenses.
Is that going to the end? Yeah.
Annex D.
Yes. Okay, so then let's do the remuneration policy. Okay.
But that's-
Yes, yeah, that's right. I don't want to jump over what gets reimbursed, because there were some questions and changes to make.
I think the confusion is that I attached my old staff report from May, and there was
Yes.
an old version in there that you were
Yes.
looking at.
Okay. So if we look at Annex C, page 24, this is with regards to the remuneration review policy. So this is coming back and reviewing this. How often do we do it, and what is how do we set that up? Ms. Perot.
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond to the earlier question, that all elected officials, including member municipalities, are added to our AD&D policy with our insurer, including our alternate directors if they are attending work on behalf of the regional district.
Thank you. So then, let's move back to attachment B. This is the bylaw. The bylaw, from what I've heard from directors, is we would move this forward, removing the line once per calendar year under 3 subsection 4. Everything else is as presented. All right. CAO.
Not to in any way attempt to influence the committee, but another option as we look at this, because some of this we end up doing contemplations on the fly, is if you left the once per year, which again, I'm not saying you should, but if you left the once per year for an additional conference, we could easily, with a very small wording change, also enable additional conferences or courses or professional development in excess of the additional conference once a year to be allowable through your existing constituency budgets, which are typically underutilized.
I don't think it's the conferences or courses, it's the stipend piece that would need to come back to the board. And if it says once per year, it doesn't actually leave that open to be
Yeah,
able to
that's
do
true.
that.
It would be expenses reimbursed based on the travel expenses schedules. Yeah.
Yes. And we'd like to have it be open to allow directors to come to the board for the stipend should they need to do that or want to do that.
Which would just require additional scrutiny on the budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, seeing no further questions or comments, on page 3, there is a recommendation that the revised draft Sunshine Coast Regional District Director's Remuneration Bylaw number 732, 2021 be approved, and we'd look as amended, removing once per calendar year. Seeing no other changes, is that what I'm hearing? Director Hiltz?
I do have a question on the effective date. If we could go back to that.
Okay. Effective October, where is it?
31st.
Yep, go ahead.
I just was, I'm trying to recall, is it we do it within our term to effect in the next term so that you're not talking about your own remuneration as a best practice? And why start rather than on a fiscal year? I'm just wondering why October 31st?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
So the policy that is being put forward will recommend that for future reviews. It wasn't specifically implemented for this review, that it take effect the next term. And the reason we have chosen the October 31st date is because it's the earliest date that logically aligns with payroll that we can implement the changes to activate a new rate structure. So that would be the earliest date we could implement it.
CAO?
And the other reason, and this was contemplated actually by the task force, the remuneration task force, that, you know, the best practice is that you would do your remuneration review to set rates for remuneration for the following term. In this case, there's actually not a lot of significant financial implications in the remuneration review, but there are a lot of administrative implications in the remuneration review. And so for the relatively minor financial implications versus the large potential savings in administration, the task force recommended that in this case, it be implemented sooner.
Okay. The other piece is October 31st would be just prior to re-electing the chair, right? Chair and vice chair positions? Right? Yeah. Okay. Director McMahon?
Yes, I'm happy with this. I was going to raise the point that it's a simpler remuneration administratively, and hopefully will save, time and effort on staff's behalf. And besides, I'm happy to be a guinea pig for the new system for the next little while, in case there are any shakedown problems.
All right. So given that, I'd look for someone to make a recommendation. Director McMahon?
I'll move that. What you said.
All right. Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. Okay. Final choice. Final offer. Director Hiltz.
That's what the amended, as amended.
As amended, removing once per calendar year from 3 subsection 4. Okay. Director Toth.
Thank you. I'm still not quite happy with 3.6 with regards to the leave of the board, but I'm not going to try and amend this on the fly. This is just a recommendation. It does still need to come for readings. So I'm happy to work with the corporate officer or the chair to see if there's any other amendments that I can bring forward at first reading. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no further hands, no more further comments. All those in favor? Thank you. Perfect. Now let's move on to attachment C, sorry, Annex C. Let me go to Annex C. Yeah, I'm just about there. Page 24. Annex C, Director's Remuneration Review Policy. So this is, there were a couple of things I noticed in here. If we go to attachment A, so on page 27. Under remuneration 3.6, so the assumption was that we are doing supplemental payments for per meeting stipends. Going forward, we could actually remove and includes base salaries and supplemental payments that typically take the form of per meeting stipends. So it reads, remuneration means money that is paid to SCRD directors as compensation for the duties they perform. Period. Because the new people reviewing will no longer be looking at stipends at that point. It may come forward as an option, but will not be part of what they're going to be reviewing. Any further comments or questions on attachment A? Director Ties.
Never mind, the other one was in attachment B, so carry on.
Sorry, go ahead on attachment B then.
You had mentioned in number 2.1 in attachment B that in 2.1A on page 29, we should remove everything after including. So just annual remuneration structure rather than including consideration of annual flat rate of remuneration structure.
Okay. And there's one more in 2.2. Rather than a corporate and administrative services meeting, we don't know what that's going to look like in 4 years. We don't know if that's what it's going to be. So if we don't want to have to come back and revise this, we could have at an appropriate committee meeting, standing committee meeting. Okay. Any others in, oh, I have some more. 4.2 in the preamble, just adding a word. The task force will assess current compensation levels for the regional district. And then in 4.3E, what I recognized was that during the process that happened this time, directors were actually asked for input. I mean, we had a little survey or something we had to do, right? Nowhere in 4.3 does it actually include directors' input. So in 4.3E, this is a recommendation from staff, that it could be discussions with regional district staff and directors to gather technical information and data. So it gives them that ability to do that. Any others? Director Toth.
Chair, I'm wondering if that amendment would be better off in B rather than E, because it's talking about technical information, and I don't know that directors are really appropriate for that, but in B it talks about interviews with persons thought to be appropriate. It could read such as current and former elected officials.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. Staff? You okay with that? They're good with that. Okay. So instead of in E, it's going to go in B. Anything else? Seeing no further comments or questions, we have, go back to our recommendations. All right, so, and then it would be that the proposed director's remuneration review policy be approved as amended, and that the amended director's remuneration review task force terms of reference as shown in attachment B be adopted as amended. Moved by Director Pratt, seconded Director Toth. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Now see if I can get to the right page for the next piece. Okay, there we go. So this is review of director reimbursement of travel and other expenses and constituency expense policies. And this is to the CAO. Is there anything further that you wanted to address in this one, Mr. McKinley?
Just noting that the attachments did finally come
Yes.
forward.
Yes. Okay, one of the questions or comments that was mentioned during the agenda review is that there is an IT policy, I believe, at the regional district. It is not currently signed by directors, and that is with regards to how we use the IT provided to us. And there is no using own devices policy. Okay, Director Ties and then Director McMahon.
Yeah, I also want to point to page 34, right at the bottom. It says the Remuneration Committee can recommend the following: a portion of internet and data charges and other technology expenses, such as subscription for software necessary to director, as well as maybe a phone bill if you're using your own phone, a portion of your phone bill. So I'm just wondering if we want to have some of that reimbursed to us, considering the amount of time we spend at home on the internet and on our own personal phones.
All right, Director McMahon. I think Director Ties, that is actually included in the policy that we'll be looking at. So we can have a discussion when we get there. Staff actually took that piece and put it into the policy. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I have, since the beginning of the term, struggled with the whole technology devices part of this. I think at bottom, it's not clear to me what the purpose of providing a phone and a tablet or Surface to the directors is. Is it to help us perform our role as directors? Is it to help us read agendas at meetings? But, you know, in terms, it's not sufficient for a home office. You can't use a Surface for a home office. I have a much more elaborate home office set up myself. And, you know, I don't know, because we work from home. That's basically what we do. And so I'm not clear what the purpose of the devices is in the first place. And so if we determine it seems what the purpose of the devices is, frankly, is to keep us within the SCRD's kind of IT fabric, except that hasn't really worked because most of us are not using the devices that we were supplied with. So, you know, if we could get to the purpose first and then figure out what devices we need to accomplish the purpose that we have set out.
That's a good viewpoint. CAO.
Yeah, anyone else from staff that wants to help me out with this one? But in general, yeah, the purpose for the surfaces, let's say, in its initial form, and this isn't just here, in many municipal and regional district governments, was to provide a means for councils or directors to have a tool to access electronic agendas. That's where it started. You know, way back before the days of Zoom, it was to make sure that directors had access to something. The cell phones is another way that it was envisioned that directors would have access to, potentially one that's supported by our IT department. You could have your SCRD email on it. You can do all those things. It satisfies all the server location requirements, all the data requirements. That was the purpose of that. And we recognize that in many areas, and certainly here, many of our directors have chosen to either supplement the equipment that's provided or use equipment instead of or in addition to the equipment that's provided. The constituency allowance now includes provisions for technology expenses, subject to suggested changes or the pleasure of the committee and ultimately the board. But that was the purpose for the gear that was provided and supported by our IT department.
Before I go to Director Toth, I used to work in IT years ago. I mean, I was working in IT when Outlook first came out, so I've been around for a while in IT. My first computer cost, I think it was over $5,000. So the cost of computers now is much less. At that time, having a laptop was not standard. And I think that's the history behind all of this. And I don't think the question that Director McMahon has asked has ever been asked now in this context where you can get, a pretty good computer for $1,000, or less, depending on what you're doing with it. So what is the purpose of this, right? And how do we use that? So that's a good question to contemplate. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the corporate cell phone, I've got a couple points here. Regarding the corporate cell phone, I don't hand out my personal telephone number to people who want to talk to me about constituency stuff. I give them my District of Seashelt voicemail extension, and if it's something I need to phone them back on, I will phone them back from my phone or from another phone. Anybody can Google me and find my phone number. It's not difficult to find, but the people that I've spoken to and I say, like, look, I don't hand out my personal number, they are very appreciative of that, and they are respectful of my attempt to disconnect from this job. I don't want somebody who's angry or upset about their garbage can get knocked over at 11:30 at night calling me to vent at me, right? So that the cell phone thing, I could see some people wanting to take advantage of that. There are virtual numbers now. I'm sure they could set us up with extensions here at the office that would forward to our personal cell phone numbers. I'm sure there are other ways that this could move forward. However, the one thing is that I do continue to struggle with email access on my personal phone because it's not inside the IT environment here. Logging into webmail, I would say, works 30% of the time. And trying to set up my Outlook application on the phone with the regional district has been a non-starter for 2.5 years. My District of Seashelt email, not a problem. So I assume there's something going on in the back end from a security perspective. But and then as for the laptop and the Surface, I don't own a laptop. As technologically connected as I am, I do it all on desktop. So when I leave town or I'm somewhere else that isn't home, the SCRD supplied Surface is how I participate in these meetings. So sure, it might not be appropriate for everybody. And as I'm sitting here looking at both my iPad and my Surface, my iPad is sitting there dead and completely useless to me today. But having the devices available certainly is helpful, even for people who are technologically connected, like myself.
Corporate Officer?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add a little bit more context to that too. And I think that, obviously with the virtualization of software and where things are moving technology-wise, we could probably look at this again, but we don't have a bring your own device policy. So part of the reason we provide devices is to give us some assurance that we can be in compliance with freedom of information and protection of privacy legislation, for example, so security of the records. And it also, with that comes in-house tech support. So we don't have an ability to support devices that are not SCRD devices within our environment.
Right, so you've got some consistency across platforms, and it cuts down on the tech support required, knowledge on that side. Okay. Director McMahon?
Yeah, this is clearly a considerable can of worms, and I suspect that the SCRDs probably had to look at policies around technology at home offices for staff as well, because this is really a moving target. But having these devices to keep us in compliance with freedom of information would only work if we were actually using them, which most of us aren't. So that what we need, I think we need to look at this some more in terms of purposes. Because another thing I look at is I have a fully equipped home office because I've always had one. But if somebody runs for my position in the future who is not fully equipped with technology, they're going to have a hard time doing the job on $750. Got to tell you right now. And the Surface, yes, that dates back to the whole agenda thing, but the agendas now are fully available online, and the Surface doesn't give us any special access that we don't already have. For instance, we can't archive files. We can't archive email because we are not employees, so we don't have access to that part of the SCRD's universe. So having the option to supply equipment if it's needed makes sense, but automatically issuing equipment to people when we're not going to use it doesn't make any sense.
All right, any other questions or comments? I think that conversation is something that we'll probably want to pursue prior to the start of the next term, so over the next year. I don't know if that's a conversation that we would look at implementing inside of this policy. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, the future discussion, you know, this is the hybrid meeting. Is this the device that connects you to the hybrid meetings? You know, that's how I'm seeing the future. Is this is me. This is my office travels with me. So this is how I'm expecting IT to expect a certain consistency on my end for them to be able to fulfill their role. That's, you know, so maybe it will come out more in the electronic meetings as we go along. What do we need to do to be able to participate in hybrid meetings? So that might be where this discussion goes.
Director Pratt.
Thank you. So definitely the bring your own device policy, I think, especially as we're moving through this hybrid, this Zoom and this electronic era is definitely something we need to look at for elected, as well as however it works with staff as well. It's interesting because I've had very few problems with the device. I know there have been a lot with the Surface. I have webmail works for me 95% of the time. The majority of the time I'm using it on my laptop, not on just because it has a larger screen. The screen of the Surface is challenging, especially the older I get. And yeah, but not only that, it's I mean, right now I am between so many different screens that my eyes are just going wonky, and I have like 20/20 vision, and this is driving me insane this morning. So as we move forward, that technology piece, I think this is going to be a larger conversation, and it's because we're in such a weird situation where everything has gotten pushed to the electronic necessity, and I would agree with what Director McMahon said. You know, we need to be flexible for who is going to be coming into these positions, that they have the support. But it's like the same thing with the cell phones when we were elected. Not all of us took, you know, we don't all take advantage of having that corporate cell phone because of our own personal circumstances. So, and you see this in the business and the corporate world as well. Some people are very comfortable having their own personal device for whatever. And so I think it's a matter of the flexibility and building that in so it still works in within FOI and within FOIPA. And with doing it as webmail, I mean, I'm not as worried about that. And then everything else around FOI, it's, the onus is on us. If we've got an FOI request, then we've got to be able to provide the documents, whether they're on a personal device or not. It's just, it's easy, it's more streamlined, it's more efficient if it is already on a corporate device. So these are issues that have already been there through government, and I think it's just becoming more and more complicated as we go into this more technological age.
Okay, so as the mayor in District of Sechelt, we are provided with an iPad and an optional laptop, given the volume and stuff that we deal with, and a cell phone. So I said no to the laptop. Otherwise, I would have had my personal laptop, the Surface, the iPad, another laptop, and 2 cell phones. And then if I would have come here and get a cell phone, I would have 3 cell phones. I said no. Right? So it's that. What is, to Director McMahon's point, what is the purpose of the technology? There are people who do not have technology. And, you know, coming and doing this job, we need to provide them with the tools that they need to do the job. But what is that? It might be inside of that different, as you said, Director Pratt, depending on the individual. All right, back to Director McMahon and then CAO. Did you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I can do that, and I'll try to remember to take my hand down as well. I was just going to point out that some of the thoughts that we were looking at putting these packages together and looking at that technology amount in the constituency fees, which you guys are free to alter should you choose, was thinking about how these, in my case, is my first Surface. So I used to feel pretty technologically savvy, and as more time goes by, I feel less and less technologically savvy all the time. I also became a slave to multiple screens. Like, the idea that I would work on only one screen is just so bizarre to me now. So this little unit with some peripherals does allow you to use, I can use this screen for my email, and I use it for all my Zoom meetings. I can minimize it and go to my agenda. The camera still works. But you can plug this into either one large screen that you can split, or into two additional screens. You can get a wireless mouse, a wireless keyboard. For those of you like me with fat fingers that don't like typing on this little thing and keep making mistakes. And the overall cost of doing that is actually pretty reasonable now, like especially for things like screens. So we were trying to pick an amount that levered the technology that's provided, recognizes that for some people they're going to want to create their own solution that works better for them, and still attaches to what can be supported by our IT department and meets all of the privacy, et cetera, requirements. So it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and it can expand quickly, but we were just trying to find something that allowed you to utilize what's here, but make it work as best you can at your own individual space.
Thank you. Director McMahon, and then Director Pratt.
Yeah, Director Pratt, I think, used the term assistive devices. And that's the other thing with technology changing, is that these tools can really help. Like, if you don't have good eyesight, there's all kinds of ways to, even voice recognition. It's really amazing that the technological tools can enable people to participate. And of course, we're in a democracy, and that's what we want to do. So this is fun. I don't envy the IT department trying to sort this out, but.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
It's one thing that just, it occurred to me as we're conversing about technology and everything, and one of the things that I always go back to is when I chair a meeting, I prefer a paper copy. And that's a piece of it too. Like, the technology is great, but also at the same time, we're always going to have that, we always are still going to need that other option, just because from a comfort level, like I said before, the multiple screens while trying to, the brain is, some kind of adaptive technology for, I'm trying not to be silly and laugh about it, but at the same time, this is a challenge. It's a very challenging time to be sitting here in person, and also, you know, having the big screens on, like, on both sides of the boardroom. I've got a laptop, I've got my, and then I've got the camera here too on my other, you know, so I've got the Surface, the laptop, I'm looking at multiple screens, and then also getting text messages from, you know, director, like, you know, oh, hey, did you think about that? You know, so it is a very challenging time. So, sorry, I'm just pontificating now.
All right, so let's look to page 39. So 39, there are some changes made. One of the questions was in number 12, did we want to include, instead of, like, similar to the amount equal to provincial reimbursement under number 8, if we wanted to include where they actually came up with these numbers as part of this in number 12. And I don't recall what that actually is. Director McMahon and then Director Ties.
Yeah, I would be much happier if we had some outside reference point that we can look to, because otherwise it's very individual opinion. You know, I think that the maximum daily per diem is rather high and would be comfortable with a lower rate, but then, you know, who's to say what it should be? So if we have a standard we can point to, I think that would save a lot of trouble.
Thank you. Director Ties?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of. I can't recall where exactly staff found the relevant figures, but to keep referencing to that being updated every half year, and because inflation does happen, and I think it I don't know. I'll leave it up to staff. What's easier?
I think in terms of if you would like to tie it, we use the National Joint Council of the Public Service of Canada. And I think we provided a link in one of the documents, but it's easy to look up. They alter their rates twice a year, probably from an administration standpoint, if you wanted to tie it to that, and it was going to be looked at in probably annually. That's when the mileage rate is adjusted. I'd look to Tina to confirm, but if we were going to do something like that, it would be easier administratively to look at something annually, and we could build in a mechanism that would tie it to that, which could be as simple as saying, you know, based on whatever the October rate is from the previous year, would tide you over to the next year type thing. But we could figure that out. If you want it tied to that, we can find a way to do it.
I think what I'm hearing is that that's something that automatically adjusts. So it's not something that has to be revisited and come up with numbers. It's set separate from the board or staff. Independently, yeah. Okay. Any other changes in here? So where does the 113.25 come from? How is that calculated? Yeah, go ahead.
So that is the full. This assumes that you've left the Sunshine Coast before 7 o'clock on Monday morning for an overnight trip.
Right.
Maybe you're going to a conference for 3 days. So if you add up the breakfast rate, the lunch rate, the dinner rate, and the incidental rate, that gives you a maximum per diem rate for a 24-hour period. And the way that would work is, let's say you were on day 2 at UBCM, but lunch was provided. Your per diem rate would be the 113.25 less lunch, and that's how it would be calculated.
Okay. Go ahead.
The alignment with staff is I just see changing numbers twice a year, even once a year. Those expense forms that we fill in would have to be updated and changed, and all through the staff. It seems administratively large. We haven't updated these for 15 years, and we've been able to get through 15 years. So I'm okay with just kind of, it's a good starting point for me. Yeah, I'm okay.
Hang on, I'm just going to check with staff. I think these reforms get updated every year because mileage changes.
Yeah, I think mileage gets updated every year. The per diem rates haven't been updated in the board's case since 2000 and staff's case since 2006. So this would be this tying it to something annually. Either you could look at that October 31st cost of living allowance, that is calculated, or you could tie it to this one if you wanted to tie it to something annually, or it could just last the term. That's totally, we can operationalize any of those options.
Okay, Ms. Perot, you indicated that the province updates theirs once a year. When do they do that?
So it's the provincial mileage rate, and I'm not sure about their per diems just because they are their whole policy is very different than ours. So they review their mileage rate April 1st of each year.
So maybe that's the date we look at. They get updated April 1st for all of it.
That may actually sync with the other period for the Joint Council of Canada. We can check, but I think the rates are April and October, so it might be easy enough to tie it to that.
Okay, thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Director Hiltz. I think, these numbers haven't moved in, 21 years, almost to the day here based on the approval date on the policy. I look at these numbers and I think that they're rather rich, personally. The dinner one, for example, is double, almost double what it was. But, inflation, 21 years of cost escalations, things like that. So I'm okay with tying it sort of down with a more modern number. I think adjusting it annually is just additional staff work. I mean, part of the remuneration changes was to make staff's workload when it comes to dealing with the board easier. And so why would we go and make a bunch of policy changes that need to be reviewed annually to compensate? So that's my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Ties and then Director Lee.
Well, I was going to make that motion, but maybe the Altons talked me out of it now. I don't know. I guess we can go either way.
Director Lee.
I actually agree with Alton that we've survived for a long time, and I sure don't want to see extra work for staff. And we always have the option of going with receipts if we so choose. So I think just put a figure in there and leave her for a few years and see what happens. That's my take.
Okay, so Director, so would you like to leave number 12, 14, and the second 14 to be as presented in the on page 39? Director McMahon.
Yes, I'm okay with it because basically we're not changing our budget for travel. So we still have to stay within our budget, so.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on these? As I look around, back and around to everybody. Over here, up there, down there. Okay. I think we are good. So if we go back to our original Annex D, there is a recommendation. And just see if there are any changes in there. I don't see, sorry, we still have the board policy manual, right? Sorry, back in the other material that was sent to us, page 40. This is the board policy manual with regards to expense accounts for constituency expenses. I had one addition to be added in. 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph, where it says the cell phone must be returned to the SCRD at the end of a director's term. But just before that, it says directors may purchase the devices at a depreciated cost at the end of their term. So the cell phone must be returned to the SCRD at the end of a director's term unless purchased. Or unless, whatever, something like that. Director Toth.
Yeah, just to follow up on that particular item, and then you can go back to the speakers list for me for the other thing. But I'm wondering if that last sentence is even necessary at all, because it mentions a tablet and a cell phone earlier, and then it says that these devices remain the property of the SCRD. However, directors may purchase the devices at a depreciated cost at the end of the term. Period. Full stop. I wonder if that's sufficient.
I think in previous years, there have been cases where directors were not aware up front that they had to be returned. So that's why I think they're specifically indicating it in here that when you read this, you know that it needs to be returned, right? CAO?
Perhaps the final sentence could simply say something like devices not purchased must be returned at the end of the term.
That works. All right, we have a list. Director McMahon and then Director Toth.
Yes, all the points I raised before about devices, I think we need to revisit this policy. Because the purpose for the policy is to provide clarification, and we're still needing more clarification. But I don't want to start trying to edit this on the fly right now.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I mentioned it the last time we saw it. I'll mention it again. Looking at paragraph 3, talks about internet and data charges, 2/3 and 1/3. You can get internet plans ranging from $30 a month to $200 a month. My internet bill is my personal choice, and it's, even at 1/3, I could be reimbursed a much higher level of internet expense than somebody who's looking for 2/3 if they have a lesser internet plan than me. I think, again, this is another one where now we have to submit all our internet bills, and that's more staff time that has to be processing these internet bills. I would much rather see a flat rate for home office connectivity. I don't know what that is, whether that's $50 a month for electoral directors and $30 a month for municipal directors. I leave that to staff to determine, but I think, my internet bill is my choice, and I don't see that as something that the SCRD should have to pay for.
Good point. Director Ties.
Yeah, I was going to go along the same vein because, somebody might have a teenager at home that really wants to do a lot of gaming and needs the fastest internet connection possible at $200 to $300 a month. And I don't think that we should be then paying for that. So I also am for a flat rate. I think we pay about $100 a month right now. So that's so if we were to go with 2/3 for electoral area, that would be somewhere around the $60 to $70 range, and then maybe 70, and correspondingly for the municipal directors. Just some thoughts.
Okay, Director Pratt.
So just a couple of items that I would need clarification on from staff. If we do go to a flat rate internet bill, I know I know from my previous elected experience, we still had to, we did have a flat rate. However, we still, at least once a year for the purpose of auditors, we needed to have a copy of our bill on file. So, so it's not, I mean, we would probably still need to have that backup. Also, regarding the cell phone, I would, if we do take on a cell phone and a director does want to keep it, I'm just curious that may not be possible within the cell phone agreement that we have as a corporation with the cell phone company. So where it's a little bit different with the other technology, cell phones are their own mess in there. So I don't know if we want to actually mess too much with that clause without staff looking into it a little bit first.
I think if that were the case where a director at the end of the term wanted to purchase the cell phone at whatever that reduced rate is, it would probably just mean that the cell phone has to be wiped.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the cell phone issue, can we, if someone purchases a cell phone, will the SCRD let that number travel with the phone?
I think that's actually been allowed in the past.
You've plunged to a depth that I cannot answer very quickly. I don't know if anyone else can help me out with that one. I don't know the answer to that one.
It was something previously that wasn't allowed. It wasn't actually technologically allowed. Numbers were assigned here, but things have changed in the last few years. Ms. Perot?
Yes, that has occurred in the past, where if a SCRD phone was issued and the electoral area or a director wanted to have that phone, if they no longer chose to continue on or run, they could take that phone and the associated number. There's just sort of a small conversion fee too, so we settled that up with the director.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of the things that are outstanding that I'm hearing is a potential fixed cost for internet, cell phone. The other one that nobody mentioned was data. And that's something that can vary a lot across plans and cost. Ms. Perot?
Yeah, so one of the things that some other local governments offer is a flat sort of office fee to cover a bundle of these. And as such, it's termed something, and the term is escaping me right now, but there is some CRA implications to different options, and some might be taxable benefits, so some of those types of considerations. But what they offer is sort of a bundled price per month that it's almost like a stipend towards these types of things. But it doesn't, the stipend in this particular context, we'd have to kind of do an if and an or. And so the stipend would assume that everybody's kind of doing the same kind of thing, or that stipend just covers all of your home office expenses, period. So say it's like $100 a month type thing. That's another option.
Yeah, and some of that would be, like website hosting could potentially be separate, printing supplies, facility rentals, right? Those would be separate. I think what we're looking at is cell phone, data, and internet because of the variability of all of those. The others are electoral area director or director dependent on what they actually take on. Directors. Director Ties.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make that motion that we implement a stipend to support data, cell phone bills, and internet.
Okay, is there a seconder for that recommendation? Okay, seconded. Ms. Pro.
Sorry, I lowered my hand there once it was seconded. To want to imply I was
Hasn't
seconding
been approved
anything.
yet.
I just wanted to clarify that, of course, you know, we like finite details here in the back end. So the stipend, would it be over and above or within the existing budget? Because I think this would need to be clarified. So would it come within your existing constituency expense, and these are out of your constituency expense, you're going to get this stipend, or is it over and above? So just something to consider.
Director Ties and then Director Toth.
Well, I would think at $100 a month, that is almost half of our constituency expense. So I would think that would need to be over and above.
Director Toth?
Thank you. I'm inclined to agree with Director Ties. I seconded the motion to put it on the floor, but I don't want to see us trying to, you know, write this or figure this out on the fly. I'd rather just refer the whole thing back to staff with an eye to rewriting that portion that we've discussed. But
All right, anything further? Director Hiltz, you're thinking.
I'm trying to put together the stipend and the allowance and kind of what are we trying to do today with this document? That's whether we're directing staff to kind of seek an alternate allowance for this data internet kind of thing. So whether we have to send the whole thing back, or can they just report back about an option about that particular item?
Okay, what is the recommendation we have on the floor?
Thank you, Chair. Currently, you haven't referred the policy to any committee if that's what you were wanting to do, but the suggestion made was to implement a stipend to support internet, cell phone, and data over and above the existing constituency expense.
All right, so that's the recommendation that's on the floor. So what I'm hearing from directors is we could potentially amend that to refer this policy back to staff to incorporate that and bring it back to committee. CAO?
Yeah, I think that would allow us to show you basically a couple of options that one of the things we could easily do is go backwards a little bit and see if that could be absorbed into the existing or traditional constituency expense utilization. I think, frankly, if we were to look at the last 4 years and look at constituency expense utilization, the idea of $100 a month for those types of, like for data cell coverage, would probably easily fit within what's been used, but we can certainly bring something forward that looks at both amalgamating it within and the financial implications of doing it outside and in addition to.
Yes, so to CFO Perot's comment about the impact on the board members, directors of the various options, I think would be part of that as well. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Director Pratt.
yeah, because part of my concern is if an expense becomes a taxable benefit. And so, yeah, so I think it bears a little bit more looking at.
Okay, Director McMahon.
Yes, I'd like to make the motion that you just outlined so eloquently.
Maybe.
Point of order, there's one on the floor.
Yes, I think what she's looking at doing is amendment to the motion that's on the floor. And that would be that this report be referred to staff to come back with a stipend to cover internet, data, and cell phone charges, and including the financial implications for directors.
Awesome. I move that.
Thank you. Is there a seconder on the amendment? Seconded on the amendment. I just want to point out one thing. One of the things that's kind of running in the back of my mind is, again, if we're looking at somebody who doesn't have a home office, they may not actually have internet. They may not have a cell phone, right? They don't have a data plan. And yet we're saying, come and take this job. We're going to give you some technology and now figure out how to make it work. So this is providing, I mean, I'm looking at, the equity piece, right? The equity lens. If we look at that for this position, we need to ensure that whoever steps into this can actually do the job without incurring additional expenses on their own side, on their side. There may be still, depending on what we end up having the stipend be, but that's something we need to provide. All right, so on the amendment to the original resolution, all those in favor of the amendment? Thank you. So we have an amended motion. All those in favor of the amended motion? Thank you very much. Do you want to take a break for 5-10 minutes and then come back and do the last piece? What do you want? 5, 10? 5? I've got a 5 and a 10. Let's do 7. We're at 11:21. Let's make it 11. Make it 11:30. That's 9 minutes. 11:30. All right. Welcome back to the Special Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 29th. We are moving on to item number 6, Directors' Roles and Responsibilities. And this is introduced by the CAO, Mr. McKinley.
Yes, thank you. And a lot of people contributed to these. We're hoping that they're a high enough level to be inclusive without being too granular. So we took a run at trying to make them appropriately detailed.
Thank you. Do we want to look at the corrections first, like grammatical kinds of things? And then we can come back to the... I'm going to move to page 47. Look at J. It should be just ability to prioritize. And in L, ability to analyze. And the next page, page 48, this is for municipal directors, but it doesn't always say municipal director. So where it says electoral area director role summary, should say municipal director. That's in the title of the, right? You got that one? Yep, right in there. And if you go to the next page, page 49, under time commitment and availability, second paragraph, municipal directors, and then the same changes in J and L, ability to prioritize and to analyze. All right, so that's the grammatical stuff. So, comments, questions? Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I note, and maybe I've just missed it because I didn't get a chance to read this until this morning, I don't see in the electoral area director or municipal directors may be required to preside over committee meetings. For example, for the chair, it's mentioned that they preside over the board meetings, but it's not mentioned in other directors' roles whether they would be presiding over committee meetings. And if we're going to give it all to the chair, then that's a conversation we should have.
Okay, no, good point. Director Ties and then Director McMahon.
Yeah, I didn't really see a reference to correspond, consult, and meet with the public on matters relating to the regional district. So, which is most of what I do. And then I also did not see anything on advocacy, doing advocacy.
Okay, the first point, would that be an F? Liaise with community organizations such as taxpayer, no, maybe not, other special interest groups. 10 local events in support of constituents. L. Engage in public consultation through formal and informal channels and may organize meetings with local constituents on various initiatives. Would that?
Yeah, I guess that could kind of.
And then the second one? Say the second one again.
Advocacy to other bodies of government. I guess part of that is AVICC and UBCM, but
That would be under H, I think.
Oh, H, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I just didn't remember seeing it, but it is there. Never mind. But I think we could maybe beef up L a little bit with rather than consultation. I just don't like the word consultation, but anyway.
So how about engage with local constituents on various initiatives through formal and informal channels? Director McMahon?
What I would say is respond to constituent inquiries and concerns, because that's what I spend a very great portion of my time doing. And if you want to be if you want to nitpick it, it would be respond via, phone and email, but I don't know if we need to get that granular.
Okay. CAO?
Less granular is better than more granular.
Thank you. Anything further, Director Pratt, on that? So you think that would be an extra one or would replace this one? So L was engage in public consultation through formal and informal channels. You're saying respond, what did you say again? Respond and engage with constituents on?
No, respond to constituent inquiries and concerns.
Okay. Would that be in addition, do you think, to L?
I hadn't I'm on a different page, so I hadn't really thought that through. L sounds more like the SCRD-led public consultations, but no, I would add it.
Okay. Thank you.
And be up high in the list.
All right, Director Pratt and then Director Hiltz.
Okay, so to Director McMahon and Director Tice's points about public, would it be respond and assist? Because a lot of our role is actually assisting, as an electoral area director anyways, is assisting our constituents in figuring out the right path, because a lot of the time we're not the answer, or the SCRD is not the answer. So I'm wondering if that, along those lines, might be a little bit, I know maybe that's getting a little bit granular, but that's part of what we do. That's our role in response. That's part of what we do, is we respond and we assist constituents with, now I'm dropping what else to say there, but I think it's respond and assist. The other thing is along with electoral area director and municipal director, I really believe that we should have a section in there around professional development, or we should address professional development. It's addressed in the role of the chair. And so on page 45, I'd like to see it worded differently. Attending relevant forums, conferences, all of that to me is fine. And some such conferences may be, because I will tell you, I mean, I've attended FCM once. I don't know, it wasn't a big deal to go to again. And there's a lot of public pushback, I will say, for going to an FCM conference. Because I mean, we can argue it either way, but it's one of may attend. It's some such conferences. So I would take out the attend on all of those and just make it a list, but with a sentence starter that says some such conferences may be ... and then AB, and then put the list. But I really would like to see professional development underneath the roles for the electoral area director as well as the municipal director.
All right, Director Pratt, you've got that. Director McMahon and then Director Toth.
Okay, I think this is a really good first kick at it, but we're going to need to work on this a bit because we haven't had a lot of time to review it. Under board chair, item B is communicate information to the board. I found that a little vague, like what kind of information? That I wasn't really sure what it was doing there. Under D, maintaining the order and conduct of debate is good. I'd like to think about that a little more, because it's not just the conduct of debate, it's the conduct of the board in public venues. And there have been problems with that in the past, and I think it's very important that the board chair set the tone of the behavior of the board. And yes, and through her leadership and brilliant example, of course. In those responsibilities, it doesn't mention anything about being the spokesperson for the organization, which is one of the roles of the chair.
It's on P. It's P, under typical responsibilities, may act as the SCRD spokesperson.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
You can see me on that one. Under the bit about agendas, and this refers back to another one of the policies about agendas, but it says it doesn't clarify who has final say on agendas. It says the board chair provides input on board agendas, and this is something I really feel that we should review. Is who exactly owns the agendas. And finally, under chair competencies, I really don't like the term customer service. Our citizens are not customers, they're citizens. I do know what we're trying to get at there, but customer service is not the term I would like to see. We're not a business, we're the government. That's my list for the board chair. I have a couple of other ones.
All right, Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. Director McMahon, in talking through some of these items, actually flagged something for me. Looking at the chair, item C of typical responsibilities, I'm wondering if there's a typo there where it says committee or commission board agendas. Not sure if that word is even supposed to be in there, thinking about the way the rest of that sentence reads. With regards to L, the engage in public consultation thing, I've got some verbiage if directors are interested in feedback.
Sorry, L on the electoral area or municipal?
Right.
Okay.
That's right, yeah. Respond to and assist constituents through formal and informal channels and may organize meetings on various local initiatives and concerns. Cleans it up, makes it a little more easy to read, avoids the consultation word. Thanks.
Okay, before I go to the next speaker, I'm just going to ask Tara if she's been collecting all of these. What I'm leaning towards here, and I'm going to look to the directors about this, is that we put all these forward, have those notes come back to us, and then we actually take this away, because this is looking at having this ready for next term, right? So it's not something that has to be approved today. We can put all this in, do some more wordsmithing offline, and then bring it back. But so if we get all the information forward now, and Tara will have the recording as well to assist with that. Okay.
I have a list.
Okay, perfect. Director Toth, okay, Director McMahon, and then Director Hiltz.
Right, so I was looking for the number and lost my place, but under municipal directors, it says attend conferences. I thought that municipal directors attended conferences on behalf of their municipality, or can they also attend conferences on behalf of the SCRD, and how does that work?
Yes.
So I wasn't clear about that.
Yes. Here's an example. What if the municipal director is the chair? Which happens a lot, right? So they have to have the ability to do that. I think we're pretty clear as municipal directors that if we're attending and representing our municipality will pick up the tab for that. If we're going on behalf of the regional district, then the regional district would pick up that tab.
Okay, just because it came up about per diems, or not per diems, stipend.
Yes.
Because we pay a stipend and Seashell doesn't. So, you would be motivated to attend a lot of things on behalf of the SCRD rather than Seashell, just saying.
Actually, regional district Seashell pays a stipend as well.
Oh, okay. I thought you didn't, so
Yeah, we do. You can apply, well, you may not have applied for it. You can apply for a stipend to attend, AVICC, UBCM, et cetera. It's part of our, I haven't done it this year, but yes.
and under competencies, I think that we all need a robust sense of humor.
One of the things that I'd like to see under the municipal director piece is reporting back to our respective councils. That's why we sit here, so that the information gets transmitted back to our councils. Okay, Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I've been able to talk to the Community Association. I was running it through our APC and our alternates on the last couple of weeks, so it's been an interesting conversation. And one of the things that people say is, what you're actually asking is to define your service to the community. This is what we're doing, and I was thinking from my perspective, but from their perspective, it was for them to understand what we do. So it wasn't just for us, it was for them to know what they get when they pay their taxes. So, and what some of the discussion is, we have lots of stuff about what tells us how to do our job, Local Government Act. And they said, and we got, I don't know, a couple hundred policies and official community plans to guide our decision making. So it was how to make it simple enough to understand. This is the granularity that has been spoken about. And the place where I always go to is my oath of office that I take. And the relationship between this document and the oath of office is, there seems to be a certain amount of duplication going on. And which one, because I only sign the oath of office, I don't sign these ones. This is one that guides my decision making. So I'm just wondering about where some of this stuff belongs. A couple of the things that was mentioned about the engage, and I agree with Director Pratt. The Local Government Act says assist. This is what local governments do, is assist. And by giving grant and aid, that's an assistance. By picking up my phone, that's assisting. Responding is something else. That's how you assist. So assist is the dominant word for me. And so I'm looking at all these various pieces. How do we make it smaller? I just find the granularity almost extreme in some ways. And I don't think we're necessarily going to help the public understand what we're doing by making us understand what we're doing. I think we need a different perspective. So I find the granularity a little bit much. And one of the other things that came out is that within a term, the previous term dealt with a whole completely set of situations. You can never prepare what the next term is going to prepare. So this ability to adapt, I find, yeah. And the other thing is, if I don't do it, who's going to fire me? What are the consequences? And I go, the oath of office is the one that I always turn to. If I'm not doing that, someone say, you signed that. So I'm going, what do I do with this roles and responsibilities? So these are some of my issues that have kind of come up over these discussions. And it is useful, totally useful to do, and to consolidate and put it into a place so people understand what we're supposed to be doing, and we understand. So, and the duplication, I just see duplications. Now I got to look at my oath of office. Now I got to look at this. And I go, which one? So I'm just finding by trying to make it easier, we're making it more complicated. We're putting too much stuff on top of it. So that's kind of how I've been kind of going through it. Is I already have my oath of office tells me what to do. The Local Government Act tells me what to do. What I'm missing is the balance between the administration and the elected. And that's one of the things that people say, is this an administration job or is this an elected job? And that's one of the things that I find missing altogether in this, is when they pick up the phone and they say, who do I talk to? Are you talking to staff? Are you talking to me? And why you talk to one person versus the other? And that assist, the put together all the right pieces. You want to go this path rather than this path is highly what we do. And the other part is the voting and the decision-making, focusing on the decision-making of the vote of, I vote on things, I make a decision that staff cannot make. Staff ask us to make that decision. And I don't see that reflected in here, that the reason staff aren't doing it is because they're not allowed to. We have to do it. So that delegation of where the decisions lie, and I don't see that kind of in here, about that division between the elected folks and the staff folks and why something comes to the board table as a decision. So I'm seeing these pieces as missing, because I think that's the one, it was in the chair's one about the relationship between the chair and the CAO. And I don't think we draw enough attention to that relationship. And that's where the public says, I'm the one who runs Area F. I don't run Area F. I vote on issues of Area F. I represent Area F. I assist people of Area F. But a lot of this stuff is, it's implicit. So I'm just, are we making more of an issue than what we already have? Rather than are we actually cleaning up the right place? So that's kind of where I ended up with this, but thanks.
So I think what I'm hearing is B and C under electoral area responsibilities needs to be clearer. And I think the reason that putting sufficient detail in here is this is going to be a document that would be provided to people who are considering running for this position. They need to know the depth and breadth of the role. It's not just you're going to read some agendas and come to a meeting. It's not what it's going to be. It's going to be a lot more than that. To kind of give them, so yes, like, do we have too much? Do we have, that's something that we'll have to look at again. Director Toth and then Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, like, you could assist through grant and aid, budget resources, et cetera, but ignore all your emails and phone calls. You do need to respond as well as part of this job. You know, I suppose you could ignore them, but it would be at your own peril to do so. With the reporting back to our member councils, I think it's important that it's written reports back to member councils. As per H in here, we liaise with municipal councils, regularly, but providing written reports back to council should be a minimum service level, because that way it forms a part of the public record forever. And there are a lot of people that don't follow the meetings live. I doubt we have any viewers right now, but they may read the minutes later and they may sort of fast forward through the YouTube recordings, right? So same thing at council.
One of the points I wrote down, well, I wrote a couple down from Director Hiltz, but I wanted to follow up with applicable legislation. So one of the duties of a director is to become familiar with, or I don't know what the wording would be. Like, you don't have to memorize these things, but have a general knowledge of the applicable legislation. Yeah, Director Hiltz, did you want to comment on that piece?
I will abide by statutes, bylaws, and policies. That's in my oath of office.
Well, but that's abiding by them. What I'm saying is, we need to know some of these. We need to know, I mean, if we need to know kind of what the parameters are, not the particulars, but we need to know what those are so that we're not operating outside of them. So I know when I need to go to the corporate officer and say, is this allowed or not? How do I interpret this? Right? That's the kind of thing. So there needs to be some verbiage, I think, in there about that we're governed by those and need to operate inside of those, and so require some kind of minimum level of familiarity with them. Okay. Director Ties, then Director Pratt.
Yeah, I really appreciate this document, and I think this will be helpful not only for people applying, and it should be part of the package when they're going to pick up their what do you call it? The package,
Nomination package?
in order to get elected. But it also helps the public to be able to make a decision as to whether that candidate is actually suitable. I'm looking through the director competencies. I can see that, several folks I ran against might not be the most optimal ones. So I just want to point that out, and I appreciate what's happening here. That's just a general statement.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thanks. I just wanted to circle back to the municipal director's reports to council. I don't think it's necessary to put in written, but specifying reporting back to council. I don't think saying written is necessary because verbal may work with each council, but it's important to highlight the reporting back to council. If they want to do PowerPoint, interpretive dance, however they need to do it, that's fine. It's just the key piece to me is reporting back to their municipal councils. Doesn't necessarily need to be written, but that closing that communication loop, however it works best, is important to highlight in municipal director.
Thank you. Anything further? Director Hiltz.
The municipal part is interesting. So when a municipality appoints a person, what do they tell that person they're going to do? Do they say, this is what we want you as a council to go there and to bring back? Or are we, the regional district, saying, you're here, we want you to take it back? So I'm wondering what do the municipalities, what guidance do they give their appointees in terms of bringing information back from the regional district table?
I think it depends.
But is there like an equivalent kind of something like this? No. Okay.
Director Pratt, and then Director Chaucer, do you want to address that? And then we'll go to Director Pratt. Okay.
Yeah, I think at least from the municipality perspective, it's sort of a have-atter. And, at least in Seashelt, we're looking at doing a remuneration review, and some of this may follow in Seashelt as well. So I think it'll be important for the member municipalities to look at incorporating similar verbiage so that we're at least, paddling in the same direction. It just dawned on me that we don't have the director from Gibson's here today, which is unfortunate, but I just wanted to comment on that.
Director Pratt.
And I think it's important for us to highlight that it's an expectation of this board that our municipal directors and our electoral area directors are reporting back to their councils or their constituents on whatever is happening here. So specifying it there, I think, is really important. It's up to the councils, each individual council, how they extract that information, whether it's by the rack or however. But anyways, but I think it's really important that we highlight it within that it is our expectation that you are reporting back to your council.
Director McMahon.
Yes, I think a lot of this is indeed about expectations of the role. And in terms of elections, this is also something that constituents can look at when they are evaluating whether their director has done a good job. Because there has never been any clear expectations around what rural directors in particular were supposed to be doing. And I think the clarification will be helpful in terms of perhaps raising the bar a little.
All right, I don't see any other hands up or none here, none online. So we have a list. So I think that will be coming back to us at as minutes of this meeting. And then we will probably want to take those and review them and revisit this at some point in the future. I don't think we can set a date at this point. CAO? Sorry, corporate officer.
Just for clarification, are you
Yes.
suggesting that we bring them back to a committee or to board for consideration of adoption?
Probably committee.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't think we're ready for adoption. I think at this point it is bring this document, the other information that we've identified. I think then directors want to take that and revisit all of that together before we give staff guidance around what we want this to look like.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Director McMahon.
Yeah, following up on some comments by Director Hiltz, if we get a new draft in plenty of time, then I can take it around to like the community association or the APC for some feedback, because I think that might be quite helpful.
Right, I don't think we're ready for staff to do another draft though, right? I think what I'm hearing is there's some themes that have come out that we want to look at in revising the document before we have staff put the draft together. Like, is it too much? Is it too little? Do we want to have, you know, I mean, like all of those kinds of questions as well. So the bigger context, as well as does it cover off everything we need to cover off? So if we get the information back, the comments and things that we made here, we get those back. We can then go back to this document, right? I mean, we got it yesterday, right? So we need some time to digest it and work with that. And then that can then come back to another meeting where we would give staff some guidance, change this wording, add this line. At that point, they can put together another draft for us, which we can then take out to our committees and our communities. Okay? Staff, you okay with that? Okay. Anything further? Tara?
Thank you, Chair. Did you want to make that into a resolution or recommendation to bring back to a future committee?
Sure.
Just,
You have a list, right?
I have a list.
Would someone like to make a recommendation that that whole list that Tara's got come back to a future committee meeting to be presented to directors for their review? Moved, seconded? All those in favor? Thank you. Anything further? It's too nebulous now for staff to take this away and work on it. We need some more work. Yeah, Director Hiltz.
I'm just clarifying, did we actually tell staff, like, are they going to change things? Or are they just going to give us a list? They're just going to summarize the stuff, no edits to this?
No edits to that.
Just a list of what we've talked about?
Yes.
And that will, and, okay.
And that'll come back to us to be able to use that to view this document and then provide guidance to staff about how we want it edited.
Right. So we're not drafting it, the
We're not
board will
drafting
not
it.
be drafting it? Okay.
No.
Okay, all right.
No.
Yep, good,
Okay.
thanks.
All right. Seeing no further questions or comments. Director Toth. Sorry.
It's all good. I just wanted to echo Director Hiltz's lack of clarity. Let's go with lack of clarity around what it was that we just passed, because I was perfectly content to send staff away to come back with some changes to this document. If I want to review what we talked about here, I'll watch the YouTube recording. The multiple hours that it is, but it's all good. It's passed and we can move on.
Thank you. I would then look for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And we have no attendees in the gallery. IT, are there any questions that came through?
Nothing that I'm aware of, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you all at 1 o'clock at our workshop.
Before you guys go,
Yes.
just wondering, Well, I think my daughter is fine enough to hang out here on her